Welcome to another Garage Time with Goody, and today I'm going to be going over 4 solutions to fix your sloppy shifting column, and I'm going to be doing this in a 2002 Ford F-150 5.4 liter engine, but this will also work in a lot of other Ford vehicles. The concept is also the same in some other cars. So let's get to it. Solution 1. Locate and adjust the shift indicator wheel. Okay, the first thing you want to do is just open up the door to your truck or vehicle, and you're going to want to look underneath the dash, and you're going to want proper lighting so that you can see, and you'll see this up underneath the steering wheel, a little plastic encasing with a wheel in the middle. That wheel is the shift indicator wheel, and what it does is if your shift indicator needle is out of sync, you can recalibrate it by adjusting the wheel. If that did not fix your problem, then we go to solution number 2. Solution 2. Replace the broken shift indicator bracket. Here is what a replacement shift indicator bracket looks like. Here is how you replace the shift indicator bracket. First, you pull back the front driver's seat. You're going to also need some tools. You're going to need a ratchet, and you're going to need some sockets. The sockets you need are 6, 7, and 8 millimeters. Now, once you start taking off the dash, you're going to find out there are 8 7 millimeters, 2 8 millimeters, and the bracket itself is latched on with a 6 millimeter bolt. So I'm going to start here at the top left with the 7 millimeter bolt. A lot of these are going to be in there kind of good, and then once you get them started coming out, you can do it by hand like I do a lot in this video. Now you're going to want to take out the fuse box cover, because that's going to reveal a bottom 5. There's actually 2 in each of these brake release and hood release brackets here. Those are silver in color, and there is one other black one right above the emergency brake release. So right now I am taking off the ones on the bracket. Now there's going to be 4 here total. There's going to be 2 in the top of the bracket, and those are the ones I'm taking off now. And then underneath of the bracket, there's going to be 2. So I'm taking these off by hand, and I'm going to try to get you a good view of underneath of the brackets. And this is going to be a 7 millimeter also. There's a 7 millimeter over here to the far right, and it's going to be black in color usually, and you can go ahead and start taking that off if you like. I use the ratchet to go ahead and break the bolt loose, and then I'm just going to take it off the rest of the way by hand. There will also be another bolt in your upper right here behind this piece of plastic, but you don't have to worry about it yet because you need to get these lower bolts off first, and that's what I'm doing. Now, another reason why you want to get the shift indicator column not to be sloppy is a lot of times you won't be able to shift your gears right, or it can get stuck in park, or you might not be able to put your gear in park and you won't even be able to start your vehicle, and that will cause a lot of problems. And if you put your vehicle in the wrong gears, it could cause an accident. For example, if you think it's in drive and you're really in reverse, you could back up into a car or oncoming traffic. So it's best to do this and to fix that sloppy steering column. Now I am to the two 8mm bolts that is right underneath the dash part. As you can see, at one time that used to be silver in color originally, and now it's kind of a little rusty, but that is where the two 8mm bolts come out. I've loosened them up, and then I'm taking them off by hand. And as you're taking these bolts off, you want to make sure that you remember where they go. You may even want to take a picture, so to remind yourself, if you forget, you'll know exactly where they go. Here is underneath the brackets where there is also a 7mm bolt. Those are the silver ones I was telling you about. How there's one in the top and one underneath. And underneath is, there they are. That's what they look like, and that's how to get to them. So don't forget about these bolts. I'm taking them off right now. And the reason why we're doing this, if you're asking that question, is the bottom part of the dash here is going to have to come off so you can get access to that shift indicator bracket. All this has to come off for you to get access to that. And to pop the top plastic bezel piece off, you can just get a screwdriver and barely pull forward, and you can see there's just two little clips holding those in. And remember that bolt I said, the fourth bolt, it's underneath the plastic there, as you can see, as soon as I popped the top bezel up, and that gives you access to take out that bolt there. So again, if you start to get confused of where these bolts go, it's no problem at all. One of the good ways to remind yourself is to take pictures as you're going through these steps, if this is like your first time doing this, and that will help out a lot. Once that is off, make sure you move those cables out of the way, and the bottom part of the dash should be free and ready to take off. And I'm just going to lay it on the ground beside the truck, and then this gives you access to replace the shift indicator bracket. Once you have access to underneath the steering wheel, you're going to see the shift indicator bracket. And if you look at the wheel on this one of the first things you're going to notice is that it's extended and the top of the plastic bracket is broken. And right here is the 6mm bolt that you're going to want to take out so that you can remove the bracket and replace it with a new one. You can see how the top plastic piece is broken completely off, and that will make it where you cannot calibrate the gears at all. Okay, I have taken out the 6mm bolt here, and what you have to do then is there is this wire. It's kind of like a stretchy wire. You can see it is looped around a J hook there, and what you're going to want to do is just reach up there and pull it off of the hook. And that's what I'm going to do here. And it's really simple. You just have to make sure that you see it, and it just pulls right off. Also, make sure that the truck is in park, because that puts the J hook in your reach a lot better. And it just pulls right off there, just like that. And then you pull the cable down to where you can access it. And that's what I'm doing here. And this is what a broken shift indicator bracket looks like. And I'm going to show you right here in just a second what a shift indicator bracket should look like that's not broken. In fact, I'm going to give you a link in the video description box of where you can pick up a new one at, so that you can replace the old one here. Now, what you want to do is to go ahead and spin the wheel to the counterclockwise until it comes off, and pull the old shift indicator bracket off before you put the new one on. And I'm opening up the new one right now, and I'm showing you right here, these are the two brackets, and you can see that the top piece of the bracket is broken on the old one, and on this new one it is there. Now you want to pay attention to how the bracket came off, because when it goes back on and you put it over the loop or the thread, I'm going to give you a close-up here. You want to make sure that you do it like this. A little plastic piece that's sticking out right there, you want it to go toward the bottom. Now you're going to want to put your wheel in the middle, and then put the thread and the loop all the way through to the other side, and then go clockwise and start screwing the wheel onto the cable. And you want to get it mostly at least halfway down through the threads, and make sure it's on good, and then make sure that the loop is not stuck. And you're going to want to take it and put it all the way around underneath the steering column, and you're going to want to reconnect it to that J-hook. Again, if the vehicle is in park, which it should be anyways, then you can reach up there and just wrap that loop around the J-hook, and then pull down the indicator bracket, the plastic bracket, and you're going to want to just put that 6mm bolt back into the bracket. So the next step is to mount the shift indicator bracket back up underneath the steering wheel where it belongs. And I'm just going to go ahead and put this 6mm bolt into the housing here, and then I'm going to take a ratchet and an extension and tighten this bolt up. I'm hand tightening it now, and I usually do that with most bolts to get it started, and then I'm going to tighten it down. And again, if you want the foot-pounds to any of these screws that I'm putting in today, you just click on the video description box, and I'm going to include that. But common sense here is to not tighten this bolt down very hard, because obviously the bracket is made out of plastic, and you do not want to break these, because these are about $15. And hopefully this fixes your problem. If that does not fix your problem, then it's time for solution 3. Locate shift bracket and tighten screws. Okay, on a lot of Ford cars and trucks, in this case, it is a truck, you want to follow the brake paddle up, and you want to see where the steering wheel is. You turn the steering wheel, and you'll see there is a bracket that connects to the shifting arm. You can move the shifting arm, and you're going to see that there are 2 screws. These 2 screws are Torx 30 or T30, and that's what you're going to need to take these 2 screws out. What happens is, over a period of time and moving the shifting arm and it being used to go from park to drive to neutral, reverse, it becomes loosened over time due to vibrations and just being used. Now what I'm going to do here is take out one of these screws at a time, and that's going to prevent it just from falling, you know, down. So I'm just going to do one screw at a time. It's up to you if you want to do it this way or a different way. I just found this way a lot easier. So if you get up underneath of here and you find that these two screws are loose, you know, this could also be your problem that's causing a sloppy shifting column, or the indicator to be off, or having problems, you know, shifting. So I'm taking these off one at a time. Now once you get these bolts out, you'll want to clean it off a little bit. This is exactly what it looks like. And to try to prevent it from coming off as quickly, you don't have to do this, but I suggest that you put thread locker on it. And I'll give you a link in the video description of where you can get some thread locker. And what it does is it locks the bolt into place with this type of locker, this glue that's in the threads, and it'll prevent it from coming out from vibrations and use for quite a long time. So that's what I'm doing, and you don't have to put a whole lot. You just want to get it in between the threads of the bolt, and then I'm ready to start putting it back into the bracket. I'm going to start it by hand, and then I'm going to get my screwdriver that has the Torx 30 or the T30, and I'm going to start tightening it down. And I'm going to get that tight. And make sure it's really good and tight. And then I'm going to go ahead and start taking off the second bolt. And I'm going to do it the exact same way that I did the first bolt. I'm going to go ahead and start taking it out, making it back out. And I'm also going to put some thread locker on this bolt too, for the exact same reasons, because the gear shifter is used quite frequently and roads can be rough sometimes, and that's what loosens these bolts up. Again, you don't have to overdo the thread locker. Just put enough that goes in between the threads, and make sure you get it on all sides of the bolt. And then the second bolt is ready to go back in. And this thing should cure or dry overnight. Some dry faster, some dry slower, but mine says give it up to 24 hours and it should be good to go. So here I am. I'm going to tighten it back in to the shifting plate. This is the second bolt, and this will get that done. So this is the third solution, and if your steering column is still sloppy, you might have to go to solution number 4, which is locate the shift tube and replace brackets and bushings as needed. Okay, the first thing you're going to want to do is to disconnect your battery. Then you're going to want to take the top bezel off. You just twist it to the right very easily, and it just pulls out. Now, I hope that this does not intimidate you, because this is going to be easy and you can always refer back to the video. You can pause this video at any time. There will be 3 screws, and they're all Phillips screws underneath here, and you just take them out. There is another hole there, but that is not for a screw. That is actually if you want to take the ignition cylinder out, which we're going to do that here in just a few minutes. You see right there, I just pointed at it with the screwdriver. That is if you want to take the ignition cylinder out without taking off the plastic bezels here that wrap around the steering wheel, which these plastic bezels are going to have to come off so that we can access the shifter tube. Because if we've done everything else, these other solutions, and there's still play in the gear shifter, in the gear shift tube, then it is the gear shift tube, it is the bushings or the retainer brackets on the shifting tube. And that is what we're going to get to, is the shifting tube, by taking these parts off. So again, you don't want to lose these screws, and there will be 3 of them that come out from the bottom here. Now you can take a pair of channel locks or another kind of tool, what have you, a wrench, but the tilt handle on the left over here is going to have to come out because it holds the bottom plastic piece in place, and it can't come out unless you take it off. You'll see what I'm saying, like right here, and then you just pull down the bottom plastic housing, and then you're going to want to actually screw it back on, but you don't have to screw it back on all the way yet. And the reason why you want that on there is because as you're working on the steering wheel here, you're going to want to still be able to adjust the steering wheel up and down as you can get access to the steering wheel a lot easier. See, I'm going to go ahead and pull it down a little bit. And this is a view underneath the steering wheel. And this is why we need to take the ignition cylinder out, because the top housing cannot come off without it coming out. You'll see a little silver ball where the ignition cylinder is, and here's how you take it out. You're going to want to put the key in and switch it to run, not all the way, but just pull it over and then wiggle and pull, and the ignition cylinder will come straight out just like that. And this is the reason why we disconnected the battery, is because it would run dead if we did not. And this is why I put the tilt arm back on, because I'm tilting it down and I'm pulling that top right off. You see, once the ignition cylinder is out, then the top bezel piece comes right off. Now, this setup may be different in your car, but there is a bracket underneath in this Ford F-150 2002 5.4 liter engine. There are 4 13mm bolts on this bracket underneath, and those are going to have to come off because it is holding the steering wheel up. I went ahead and took those 4 bolts off, and then I moved the bracket out of the way. And you're going to want to take the 2 upper bolts that are left completely off, and the 2 back ones down to the bottom of the bolt. And what that will do, that will let the steering wheel drop down completely, just like this. Now what we're going to be replacing is these. This is a bushing on the left and a retainer bracket on the right. Now for easy access, just pull the seat back up and then just let the steering wheel lay on the seat, so that way it's nice and sturdy and it's not going to fall, and you have full access to inside. This is the old retainer bracket here. This is the shifting tube, and these are going to be T30s or Torx 30. I can already see that the bushings are completely worn out, and in the actual back, this is rare, but the retention bracket is completely broke off. So that is why it has been handling really sloppy whenever the gears are being changed. So I will give you a link to where you can buy the replacement parts in the video description. Now, I'm going to start taking off the old retention bracket, and I'm going to start cleaning in here the best I can. This is probably the first time it has been taken apart since this truck has been made, and there are a lot of debris and dirt and gunk that has gotten up in here, and that happens in a lot of vehicles. And you want this clean, because the bushings you're going to put in, you want them to go up against a flat surface and for it to be even all the way around. You don't want to put it up against dirt, grime, and filth. So if you have any compressed air, you can compress air this out. Look at this bushing here. You can see how it's just falling apart. You also, I'm going to use a ratchet to reach back in to get the back retention bracket off, because it's very hard to reach a screwdriver back there. You can't reach a screwdriver back there. You're actually going to need a ratchet. And this is a piece of the broken retention bracket, how it just broke off. And that happens sometimes, not a lot. But in this case, the bushings are completely worn out and one bracket is totally broken. Now I'm going to pull the old brackets off. They come off because the bushings have a split down the middle. They're made like that, and you can just pull them on out. They're definitely not supposed to look like that. That's completely worn out. And you can just pull up the shifting tube and clean underneath there, because in this case there is a lot of rubber from the bushing that is just shredded all down through there. And I clean this out with compressed air and a brush. You can also use a brush like I'm using here and just get all the crevices nice and clean. And that way, when you go to put in the new bushings, it won't be up against anything that can wear and tear it quicker, like old plastic or grime or dirt or grit. It's going to be kind of clean for you. You don't want to be doing this in another couple of years. You know, you want this work to last you. And that is what I'm doing, is cleaning this out. Again, you could even take a paintbrush, but I'm using soft bristle brush here and cleaning this out. And that's after I use compressed air. So that's just an idea, guys. And here is my replacement part. And there is the part number 905-110. And that is a Dorman brand. And that comes with a retention bracket and a bushing. But I had to buy an extra pair of bushings because I needed two altogether. And these are a new bushing compared to the old bushing. And you can see how they have the split down the middle. That means you can spread it apart so that it can go around that shifting tube, the shift tube. And again, it doesn't matter if the split, where you put the split. I like to put it toward the bottom. That's just my preference. So I'm going to put the one that goes in the back on first. And I'm going to make sure it's on there nice and even. Again, you want to take your time when you're doing these things. Don't get in a big rush. Try not to get aggravated. Because, you know, you want to do this the right way while you have it open. You don't want to get this all back together and say, oh gosh, I forgot this or that. You definitely want this surface around the shifting tube area. You want it to be clean. And that's what I'm doing. I'm putting on the second bushing, which is closest to the top, toward the front of the steering wheel. And then I'm getting ready to put on the retention bracket. And that's the little metal piece right here. This is the retention bracket. And I'm going to put on the one toward the back first. And the other one is the original. I only have one of those because the other one was broken. I'm going to start these with my hand because unless you have a small, really small ratchet, it's kind of a little bit of a pain to get a ratchet back there, and you'll have to just take your time. Or you can just use your hand and tighten these down as far as you can get them with your hands. And again, these are Torx 30 or T30, however you want to say it. I know in the car group, when I'm wrenching, as some people call it, or shade tree mechanics, you know, I learn all the time too, and people will call the same thing about 30 different names. So I apologize if I'm calling something a different name than you would normally do. Okay, now that I'm tightening this retention bracket down, the one in the rear, and there will be two, and I'm just going to use the ratchet to tighten it down all the way. And see, problems do happen. My bit came out of the ratchet and I had to put it back in there. And then I'm just going to tighten it down until it's good and tight. And once again, I'm going to put the Torx specs to all these bolts that you see in the video description. Also, any of the parts that I'm replacing or buying, I'm going to put a link to those in the video description as well. This job is pretty easy. You just have to have determination, a little bit of patience, some tools, and a little bit of money. Not much. I've spent under $50, and that's not bad at all, considering I called a couple of different garages, and if they were to do the steps in this video, then it would have cost about $700 to $800 on average in these garages. And this really isn't that hard of a job to do. So if you've made it this far in the video, then unfortunately you've had to replace all of these different parts, or at least some of them, to get your sloppy shifting column fixed, which is important to do because, as I mentioned earlier, your gears won't work right, or you might not know what gear you're in. If you can't get your gears into the right gear, you know, your car will not start if it's not in park or neutral, preferably park. And you may not know what gear you're in, and that could cause an accident. Now, what I'm doing here is I'm putting the bolts back in. These are the first set of bolts. This is, in your particular vehicle, it may differ, but this is my Ford F-150. And there are two sets of bolts. They're 13 millimeters, and there are 4 of them that go in first, and it mounts the steering column to the dash. And I'm going into the back left one here now. And I'm going to tighten it back up all the way. Like I said, with this one, I didn't have it all the way off. I just had it down to the bottom so the whole steering column wouldn't come out. But I did take off these, the ones toward the front, all the way. And now that I got these tightened down all the way, I am ready to put back on the metal bracket. There's a metal bracket in my particular vehicle that goes over top of these bolts. I'm just doing the finishing touches to make sure that they're all tightened down. And I'm trying to do this like evenly and making sure they're on there good and tight. And then that's when I'm going to put the metal bracket back on. Here I am double checking the front two. And as you can see, the steering wheel at this point should, you know, be up instead of laying down on the seat, because it should be mounted back to the dash. And with the metal bracket, it will have a metal slide on the right, and that's only on one part of the bracket. That's how you know if you're putting it in right. That bracket goes in the upper right hand corner, and then it slides over the 4 bolts, and then that's when you put in the next 4 13mm bolts that you took out over top of them. And again, I'm just going to hand start these bolts, and then I'm going to tighten them down. Now the back ones will go on a lot deeper than the front ones. There will be a lot more tread or thread, whichever you want to call it, left in the back than there will be in the front. So I'm just going to hand tighten these for now, and to make sure that this metal bracket is in place, and then I'm going to tighten it down. Again, I express to have patience during this, especially if you've never done it before. Also, don't let this job intimidate you thinking you can't do it. But at the same time, if you think this is out of your league and you just don't want to do it, you know, you might be better off taking it to a garage. So the ultimate judgment and choice is yours. I'm just making this video to try to help people, and hopefully this video helps at least one person, and that would make me happy. So I'm tightening up the back bolts, and these are 13mm. And you want to get these good and tight. The Torx specs are going to be in the video description. But these are pretty tight. And then I'm going to tighten the front 2 bolts. This is the upper left. And then I'm going to get the upper right. And you'll notice that there's not really, in the front bolts, there won't be as much thread left as there is in the back. And I'm just going to get that pretty tight. And then I'm going to go ahead and start putting the plastic bezels back on over top the steering wheel. I slide it down over top the gear shifter, and there is the flasher, the 4-way flasher on the top. I'll show you here. You have to get it to slide over that for the bezel to go on kind of flush, just like that. There's the 4-way flasher. And then I'm going to start to put on the bottom bezel piece. So at this point, I've replaced all of the parts that I'm going to replace, and I am reassembling everything. I'm putting it back together. Okay, when you slide in the ignition cylinder, it will only go in one way. Leave it in the turned on position, and then line the grooves up, push in the cylinder, turn off the key, pull it out, and it's locked. And then I'm going to continue by putting on the bottom bezel piece. It just pushes up, and I'm lining it up to the screw holes, and then I'm going to put in those 3 Phillips screws. Here goes screw number 1. And as you're screwing this together, or as you're putting in the screws, it is going to pull start pulling tight to the top bezel, and it won't look bad. It'll all go into place. So you can see as it's tightening up, it's starting to go in place there. And going to get ready for the other screws. And again, I'm showing me putting it back together so that if you missed anything the first time of me taking it apart, you can watch this of me putting it back together, or you can rewind or pause this video at any time if you run into trouble. So these screws are kind of long, so they take, you know, a good 30 seconds to a minute to put back in there. And then I'm going to go over to the left side, and I'm going to go ahead and tighten that one down. No big deal. And it's going to pull the top to the bottom, and it's all going to line up nice and neat. I'm just going to feel it to make sure it's tight. And again, these will feel tight, but not extremely tight, because it's actually going into plastic. And I'm just double checking to make sure that these are in there as tight as they're supposed to be. And everything is feeling pretty good at this point. Pretty confident that this is going to fix my gear shifting problems, my shifting column. Okay, once you get that bezel back on, you're going to want to put the tilt handle. You're actually going to want to screw it down tight this time. So I'm just going to take the channel locks and retighten this back on there all the way. It only takes a couple of seconds. Get it on there good and tight. And it's just no problem at all. And you can see that the steering wheel will tilt up and down. And before you put the bottom piece of the dash back on, what I'm going to do is I'm going to adjust the indicator. You can adjust that with the indicator wheel, and you want to calibrate, meaning you want to line up that needle to the gears. And you're going to want to start your vehicle, or at least turn it over so that you can test to see how your shifter is going to work, because you don't want to get it all back together and something still be broken. So if at this point everything tests good, go ahead and start putting everything back together. In this case, it tested good, so I'm putting the top bezel back on, and it just goes on the way it came off. You turn it to the right and then push it to the left, and it'll go over the steering wheel. Then you take the bottom dash part, and you're going to want to take the hood latch and put it over that metal piece toward the bottom, and you're going to want the brake latch to go over the plastic piece in the front, just like that. And you're going to want to push it on there, and it may take you a couple tries. I mean, because it looks really easy, and it sort of is, but it just may take you 2 or 3 tries to get it all lined up. before you're ready to start putting the bolts back in. And remember, there's going to be 8 7mm bolts, 2 8mm bolts to get this back on here. I'm going to go ahead and start with the hidden bolt, as they call it, that's underneath the top bezel piece of the dash, so I can clip the top piece back on. I'm going to start it by hand tighten it, and then I'm going to take the ratchet and tighten it down. And then, as you can see, I'm going to start tightening the main shield at the bottom, which is, these are the 2 8mm bolts, and I'm going to go ahead and tighten those down. Once I tighten these down, the dash is pretty solid now, and I don't have any fear that the dash is just going to fall down, and I can just, peace of mind, put the rest of the bolts back in. So I'm going to tighten them down with the ratchet. There's the first one, and here's the second one. No problem. Now I'm going to finish out the other bolts. Now remember, these, like the brake, here's the 7mm that's by the fuse box, and that just goes in right there. And then I'm gonna tighten it down with the ratchet. You probably didn't get a good view of that one earlier as I was taking it off, but here's a better view of that screw. And right above it is the other screw. It's also a 7mm. Just gonna go ahead and tighten it down. Good and tight. There we go. Now the bottom right, down by where the ODB2 sensor is, I'm gonna tighten this bolt, and you can see as I'm tightening it, the dash piece is becoming flush with the other part of the dash. And then I'm gonna tighten it down with the ratchet. And then it's time to put on the release handles. This is what I call them. On the left is going to be the brake release, and on the right is going to be the hood latch release. And as I showed you when I was taking it off, I gave you a close-up of those 7mm bolts that go up underneath the latches. And I'm putting in those 7mm bolts now. And here is the one to the brake latch that I'm putting in here. And then I'm going to first tighten it down hand tight, and then I'm going to tighten it down with the ratchet. You don't want to Incredible Hulk tighten these things, because again, they're bolting into plastic. You don't want to strip them, or you don't want the plastic to break. And here I'm going to put the bottom 7mm bolt in under where the hood latch is. Just going to put that on there, hand tighten it. And then I'm going to use the ratchet and it's going on there easily. No problem. And then next, there was going to be 2 more silver 7mm bolts, and it just goes into the top here. And here's the one that goes on the brake latch. And there's going to be one to the right that goes on the hood latch. I'm putting that one on now. And we're almost done at this point. And I hope that one of these solutions has helped you in some way or another with the sloppy column, shifting column. The top bezel just clips back into place, as there's only 2 clips, and then everything is back together after that. Well, you do have to put on the fuse cut box covering, and I'm going to put that on next. It just snaps into place. No bolts or anything like that. Just goes on just like that. Bottom clip, 2 top clips, push it in, and you're ready. And hopefully all your hard work has paid off and saved you money and fixed that sloppy shifting column.